Hello, good afternoon to all of you. I think we should get started in order not to lose too much time. It is a great honor for us all to welcome all of you today here, and a special thank you to all the courageous women activists from Hungary, Ireland, Poland, Spain and Croatia who joined us here in Brussels today. We are looking forward to listen to your stories and discuss strategies how to fight the backlash that we all feel actually happening to reproductive rights also here in our house. I have the pleasure to say some opening words today, and I will then give the floor to Irene Dodadio from IPPF, who kindly agreed to moderate today's event. Today we honor the human rights struggle of millions of women who have demanded respect for their rights and the rights of others. In recent decades, global progress has been made to improve women's sexual and reproductive health and rights, but unfortunately, women in Europe and beyond continue to face denials of our ability to make autonomous decisions about our bodies, our sexuality, and whether or not and when to reproduce. Sexual or reproductive health rights are intrinsic elements of the human rights framework. Without it, some of the most significant and intimate aspects of our lives as human beings are actually at risk. Progress has also brought its own challenges. In too many countries, we are now seeing a backlash against women's rights, a backlash that hurts us all. This means we need to be alert. These rights are the typical example of rights that shall never be taken for granted. We must continue to work and mobilize support for our health and our women's rights. In some member states, laws and policies have sought to roll back existing protections for women's sexual and reproductive rights, in particular through the introduction of restrictions on access to abortion and also to contraception. This backlash is usually carried out in the name of tradition. Ultra-conservative and fundamentalist actors from different faiths are using the internet and social media to organize and radicalize supporters by spreading misinformation and by manipulating the audience. This has happened, for example, with the Istanbul Convention, when anti-rights groups have spread misleading information about the treaty itself and accused the treaty of introducing a so-called gender ideology and opposing traditional family values. We, as the All of Us coalition in the European Parliament, work together intensively to promote and mobilize support for women's sexual and reproductive rights. We have to constantly fight these actions by less progressive groups such as the EPP, the ECR and others, who try to delete references to these rights in reports and proposals. Especially the EPP, as the largest so-called pro-European group within the European Parliament, should show example to the other groups. We need to work together to improve the rights of all women. And I have to say that I'm alarmed that the backlash has also affected the work of many human rights defenders, often women working to advance women's rights. These brave human rights defenders are often harassed and even killed because of their efforts to promote gender equality. But despite these threats, these activists stand up for other people's rights and have potentially the greatest impact on women's rights. We need to stand up and help them in their work to defend all our rights. And by doing so, we stand up for all of us. Again, thank you very much for being here with us today, and I'm looking forward to an interesting and fruitful meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Angelica, for this fantastic introduction, and thank you to all of us, which is such an important alliance. It's such an important group of like-minded people and warriors, men and women, and not only women, and a cross-party group, because I think it's very important to show that we are all together in this fight and that we want to bring solidarity. So my name is Irene Donadio, and I am working for the International Planned Parenthood Federation European Network here in Brussels. I'm the senior lead on strategy and partnership. And I am delighted today to moderate this event, which is really key for us, particularly at this very important moment. That's like Angelica has underlined. We see so much of oppression, so much of repression of people's rights, and particularly women's rights. We see really the question around the values that we share in society and the values that some small chauvinist minorities would like to impose on others and drag and bully them through pregnancies, bullying them to situations where their sexual and reproductive rights will be at risk. And I think that's important that we open our eyes, finally, that we see the cost of this oppression, that we see what can be stripped out of us, what we are used to have. As Angelica underlined, there is no complacency place here. There is absolutely not the possibility for relax and be laid back and think, okay, this has been conquered for 30 years, for 40 years in my country, everything is fine, because we see that this is definitely a very important step of a much bigger game, actually, of the authoritarian attempts to control people's lives, people's intimacy, to control civil space and civic space, to control democracy. So I am so delighted to listen today to the very important contributions of the people who came from different countries, member states of the European Union, to bring the voices of women and their experience, and also to listen to this room and to think together how can we make sure the reproductive rights defenders, the human rights defenders, the courageous women champions can still speak up and can still work, and so that we all have our rights and freedoms. So let me first introduce now Shari Alas, who is coming from the Patent Association from Hungary. Patent is an organization fighting against patriarchy, and she has been there since 2015, and she coordinates Hungary's only feminist sexual education project. But it's very important to listen to Shari because she's also an activist and a counselor and an educator, and in particular, she works with victims of sexual violence. She meets the survivors every day. She talks to them. She really sees what's going on the ground and what is the harm and the pain that women have to go through. So please welcome Shari, and let's listen to her voice.
Thank you. I really thank you for the opportunity to speak here and share with you the Hungarian experience. As you may or may not know, the Hungarian civil society has been under constant threats lately, and more importantly, our field work and advocacy has become more and more impossible, almost impossible in the last few years. Basically, every organization in Hungary with non-governmental funding has been required to register as foreign agents, and a fear-mongering and slender media campaign has been led against us, where lists of our names has been published and our activities has been presented as basically traitorous. The last wave of this assault is a legislative package with the explicit focus on NGOs supporting refugees, with always the opportunity of extending it to all of us who criticize politics in any significant way. Many in the civil society has stopped doing so as a result of this. Funds and donors are leaving the country, and this is preventing us from getting the much needed funding to combat the sexual and reproductive exploitation of women and girls as the very foundation of society and the economy. Our advocacy is obstructed. The new constitution of Hungary, enacted in 2012, states that life of the fetus should be protected from the moment of conception. So far, the abortion law has not been changed accordingly, and there is no consensus within the experts when and how it will be changed, or even if it will be or not. Right now, in order to have an abortion, women have to pay a fee, must go through a mandatory waiting period and counseling with the explicit aim of preventing the abortion. Non-surgical abortion is banned in Hungary to this day. We are always on alert for the imminent danger of a more restrictive abortion law. On the one hand, there is the so-called demographic crisis and the call for the explicit reproductive exploitation of women to correct it, and it has been in the center of the governmental communication. As an incentive, they attached subsidies, tax cuts, housing allowances to numbers of children had or promised, but they tie it to previous employment, further widening the economic inequalities that already exist, creating a more unjust society with their steps. Meanwhile, many Hungarian women don't have access to any kind of healthcare on the countryside. On the other hand, according to every polling, the majority of the Hungarian public would not restrict access to abortion. In fact, they would cover even medical abortion by insurance if it was up to them, and the government is very well aware of that. The sexual autonomy of women is not being protected, and violence against women is not addressed effectively. So much so that I would question if there is even an intent to do so. The awaiting ratification of the Istanbul Convention has been caught up in the so-called gender ideology wars. The law enforcement do not prosecute trafficking in women and girls effectively. At the same time, we are serving the increasing demand of countries that legalize the prostitution of women and girls. The actors of Switzerland, Netherlands, and Germany's sex trades are exploiting our country's economic and racial inequalities. All of these countries have entire streets in red light districts named after poor Hungarian cities. Instead of comprehensive sexual education in schools, family life education has been introduced into the curriculum, not only further promoting destructive ideas of roles expected of girls and boys, but also leaving them defenseless against a predatory industry. As a result, violent, misogynistic pornography had become the #1 sexual educational project, #1 sexual educational method children have access to, which is doing unthinkable damage to future generations. Obstetric violence is widespread, the choice of home birth is limited, black market surrogacy is spreading. A pimping site established by EU and governmental funding is marketed specifically to young women and girls, with yet again to no objection of law enforcement. Every aspect of women's reproductive capacity is commercialized. Sexual autonomy is non-existent to most of Hungarian women. The answer to all of these atrocities by much of the progressive community seems to be to engage in imported identity politics. And so we call for the European Commission to establish funds assured the government doesn't have access to, allocated to grassroots organizations to do domestic activism. There is basically no funding available for our underground, in-the-field critical activism and advocacy. Some grants, funds, and donors strongly limit our opportunities and confine our work to areas of activism which we are able to win grants with. It is time to recognize that the East differs from the West. The same rules cannot be applied to different systems. Financial contribution to grants in Eastern European countries was never an option since the very beginning. The institutions established with the specific aim of independence from the state do not take part in our initiatives. Do not send us funds through the state. Do not send funds through the state to these organizations. The Commission cannot trust that the government is able to, concerned about, or interested in any way of using funds allocated to combating the oppression of women properly. We ask the Commission to fund small grassroots organizations like ourselves and help our survival. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Shari. It's very important because it gives a wider picture. And now let me give the floor to Almudena Rodriguez, who comes from the Association of Family Planning in Catalonia. And she is the advocacy officer there and has a very extensive experience in gender issues, in feminism, and in development for a long time. So please.
Okay. Thank you, Irene. So, hello, everybody. First of all, I would like to express how honored I am to be here. This is an exciting opportunity from my colleagues from the Catalan Family Planning Association and also for the feminist voices to be heard. So thank you for this. And I would like to introduce the Catalan Family Planning Association. Is a grassroots level organization that has been working to guarantee sexual and reproductive rights for 30 years. And I would like really to emphasize that we are a grassroots level organization. This means that every day for 30 years we have been working directly with population, with women who have suffered gender-based violence, with women who have suffered sexual violence also, and with young women from highly vulnerable groups who need to exercise their right to abortion in our country. It is from these practices, from their experiences, from their demands, from their voices, their interests and needs that a Catalan Family Planning Association defines our advocacy strategy. As a grassroots level organization, we have always suffered fundamentalist attacks, going through movements of lesser or greater intensity. We have always resisted, and also we have also won. As a women rights defenders, we are really fully aware that in the Spanish state, and as in the rest of the world, we are experiencing a key moment in which political, religious, and economic fundamentalism are becoming stronger and stronger and more active. We know, and we are really fully aware, that for the neoliberal heteropatriarchal system to be able to maintain itself, it needs a greater number of excluded day by day. In this process of savage accumulation in which we are living, the criminalization of the groups confronting the system, amongst them the feminists, the criminalization of the poverty, the expropriation of the natural resources, and also the expropriation of the women's body and of the heteronormativity centers are, all of those, the target of the fundamentalist attacks. In Spain, our situation in Spain, we have a lot of fundamentalist groups operating in some different levels. Some of them are operating at local level, others at regional, and also at global level. We have a lot of groups well-known, like Citizen Go, like Hazte Oír, that Christian Lawyers Association, also the Thomas Toroz Center, also the Forum of the Family. And all of them have important links between political parties, economical powers. They are inside of the universities and, of course, inside of the judicial system. The most of these fundamentalist groups have changed their strategy since Alberto Ruiz Gallardón's failure in his counter-reform of the abortion law in Spain. Since then, their strategies became invisible and more subtle. And they have two main objectives now. They want to eliminate the sexual and reproductive entities working in Spain, and on the other hand, they want to eliminate the feminist collectives. They have some different strategies to achieve it. So in order to eliminate the sexual and reproductive entities, the objective is the entities cannot access to public financing, and we can keep on doing our work. This is the case of our colleagues in Madrid, the case of the Spanish Family Planning Federation, to which we are complaint to Christian Lawyer Association, promoted by a former Interior Minister, they have withdrawn the declaration of public utility, denying them the right to be eligible for a public financing. The campaign of Christian's lawyer keeps on going, but now putting the focus on the rest of entities that we are members of the Spanish Family Planning Federation. And the other objective, to eliminate feminist collectives. And in Spain, we have some important examples about it. Their main strategy is the judicialization and the criminalization of the feminist collectives. And we can see the case, our friends in Sevilla, in the south of Spain, who are in a judicial process which might them to prison. Also, in that case, the penal process was opened again by a complaint of Christian lawyers associations. Or we can see the case in the feminist collective from Mallorca, in which 5 feminists were sentenced to 1 year prison. In all of these cases, the complicity of some judges and some political parties are crucial. These cases maybe are the most visible, are the most mediatic, those carried out by the most belligerent groups. But it is important to understand and to stress that fundamentalism in Spain is also present in every single structure and in all the key institutions. If not, how is it possible to allow harassment in abortion clinics in which women practice a recognized right in our country? What about the consensus objections of professionals, hospitals, and autonomous communities of a country where women over 18 have the legal right to abortion? And why has it been achieved in 40 years of democracy that sexual education is a compulsory subject in a Spanish school? Or in addition, how is it possible that in the medical school, how to perform an abortion is not part of the syllabus even during a gynecological residency, when we know that the abortion is the most numerous kind of medical intervention in our country? What I mean is that there is a fundamentalism in Spain permeating all our structures beyond the most belligerent groups. Let me tell you one more thing. In an investigation carried out by a Catalan lesbian feminist collective, Lesbicat, the electoral list of the different political parties attending to the past elections were analyzed. In all of them, except one, fundamentalist people were identified, even in those parties having a progressive character. So in that point, I would like to refer to the report of the Special Rapporteur of the United Nations on the field of the cultural rights, because we really believe that this report is a key tool to eradicate fundamentalism. In this report, the rapporteur indicates that women's rights defenders are part of the solution to eliminate fundamentalism, that women's rights defenders have been leaders for decades confronting these problems, that women's rights defenders have the expertise and the knowledge, and we should be involved in all deliberations on policies and programs related to the fight against fundamentalism. And she makes an appeal for defenders to receive the resources and visibility we need. So taking advantage of this opportunity, so I would like to throw some ideas, in order to work together with MPs and with the rest of the entities. So It's very necessary to generate alliances between progressive groups and feminist entities. It's very important to recognize women's rights entities and feminist collectives as one of the main actors to eradicate fundamentalism. It's extremely important to provide the women's rights entities with the necessary financial resources and with the necessary protection, because we are under attack. And maybe we have a lot of things to tell and it's not possible, sorry, so maybe we are here in the European Parliament, maybe we can work together in order to define and to approve a European directive recognizing women's right to bodily sovereignty. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Almudena, for the rich contribution and the many ideas. Just to reassure you, we'll have a debate and we'll get all the contributions from the members of this parliament and from the floor. So we'll have a discussion on how we work together. And now let me introduce Krystyna Kapura from the Polish Federation of Women and Family Planning. For the very few of you who might not know her, because actually Krystyna has been a leader on women's rights and reproductive rights for a long, long time, and she has also been a very big champion of the Black protests, a movement, really a grassroots movement that has inspired women and feminist men all over the world. So, Krystyna, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Irene, for your very, very kind introduction. I feel honored, but I'm not the only one in Poland fighting for the women's reproductive rights. So, and I am not a leader, I'm just a leader of the organization. So the Black protest belongs to all Polish women, because it was the huge protest organized by informal initiatives. We serve them as the expert organization. But coming back to the topic of my presentation, Poland has one of the most restrictive abortion laws in Europe. However, arbitrary and unlawful procedures, abusive performance of conscientious objection, lack of proper information for patients, criminalization of abortion, stigmatizing environment, and then strong chilling effect on doctors lead to the situation when pregnant women have practically a very, very limited access to safe medical services in public hospitals and consequently seek an abortion in unsafe conditions of so-called abortion underground, which already has enormous quantity. Women's access to abortion services can also be impeded by a number of other factors, such as limited access to information, adequate transport and healthcare, living in rural areas or far from Warsaw and other large cities, disadvantaged socio-economic position, being exposed to various forms of violence. According to the estimates, there are 80,000 to 150,000 of abortions every year. According to the national report issued every year by the Ministry of Health, we had according to the last report of 2016, we had 1,051 legal abortions in Polish public hospitals. Could you imagine 1,000 abortions in the country with 5 million of women in reproductive age? It's rather impossible. Many women seek clandestine and unsafe abortions, self-administer the abortion pill, or travel to another country to access abortion services. In case of clandestine abortions, there is no way to verify the qualification of the person who carries out the procedure, not the hygiene and sanitary conditions in which abortion takes place. There is neither professional post-abortion care nor any real possibility of complaint in cases of medical malpractice, complications, or other harm. Many abortion pills distributed by vendors via internet are not subject to any safety control, and some drugs of identified origin and composition are offered. There is no comprehensive data on the number of Polish women who undergo abortion outside Poland. Safe abortions abroad are not available to all women due to the cost of the procedure itself. So our help is to share information about safe sources for abortion pills delivered by Western organizations, mainly these working in Netherlands. Economically and socially disadvantaged women are most severely affected by the Act and its implementation, also because they cannot afford private health insurance, which provide better access to reproductive health services. Within the public health system in Poland, they often cannot afford contraceptives, including emergency contraception, which, of course, probably you know, right now is stopped selling on the counter. We need prescriptions. Some try to induce miscarriage by taking different kinds of drugs, using dangerous means of tools, or by hurting themselves. Others may risk their health, even life. And of course, there is no statistics and there is no evidences of such terrible cases. We run a hotline regularly on a daily basis for women, so we have some information about many, many cases on unsafe abortions. We have also gynecologists on duty, so we help women, just empower them and stop them to be frightened to go to a doctor, to the hospital, after self-made dangerous abortion or made by somebody with not experience or information. Women who have become pregnant following sexual assault encounter additional barriers in access to legal abortion services. They often fear reporting the crime and being exposed to harassment or blamed for the crime. Survivors of sexual violence are frequently viewed with suspicion or discouraged to report the crime. Moreover, they often face greater difficulties in obtaining the required prosecutor's certificate. While there are many criminal acts that might result in a pregnancy and over than 4,000 crimes of this type are noted every year, there are a very few terminations of pregnancy that resulted from an unlawful act. To get access to legal abortion right now is a miracle in Poland. There are the whole regions where abortion is not accessible because the whole hospitals signed conscientious clause. Of course, this is not according to the existing law that the public institution can sign a conscientious objection, but all doctors sign this, so when a woman comes to such hospital, probably she is answered that not here, we have no staff. What does it mean? It means that all doctors use conscientious clause. More, she's not answered who and where, because Constitutional Tribunal allowed doctors to refuse information, saying that this is also against their conscientious clause. The European Court of Human Rights has delivered 3 judgments against Poland identifying violations of reproductive rights related to prenatal testing and abortion. None of these judgments has been implemented, yet the state had to pay compensation to the total amount of 140,000 euros. 2 European Court of Human Rights decisions state that Poland violated women's rights to stay free from inhuman and degrading treatment in cases of access to legal abortion and prenatal diagnosis. We meet situations in Poland when women come into the hospital and they are just begging doctors, please help me. This happens especially in the cases of fetus abnormalities and impairments, because these abortions are late abortion, as you know, about the 20 weeks of pregnancy. So they need sometimes post-abortion care. and it's difficult to go abroad to get access to the late abortions and stay there for post-abortion care. So right now we have one such case in front of the Polish courts. If we fail, we will go to the Strasbourg, to the Human Rights Tribunal. Yeah, just a few sentences about our activities on this limit of time. Yeah, since our activities has positively impacted the general public's attitude towards women's reproductive rights, we want to continue our work on an even larger scale, thanks to the Great Coalition for Equality and Choice. This is an informal initiative gathering 100 non-governmental organizations and pro-women movements. The coalition's main aim is to promote women's rights, especially sexual and reproductive rights in Poland, and to combat violence against women. The main activities we are planning is monitoring the violations of women's rights in Poland with a special impact put on reproductive rights and violence against women. We want to combine the monitoring efforts of various members of the coalition and identify the gaps that need further research. Aim to promote existing watchdog projects and call on women to contact us in the event of a violation of their human rights. Internal strategic meetings, advocacy on national and regional level, and of course raising awareness campaign and raising awareness activities within the European Union, European Parliament, because we need support of the EU in these issues, even with the existing legal framework, because this existing law doesn't work in practice at all. This is a dead law. Even in these narrow cases, abortion services are not accessible in Poland. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Christina, for the very powerful presentation and for showing, the harm and the problems that women face, and also the fact that we see a continuum of violence, that three speakers already put it there. It's abortion, it's reproductive freedom, is civic space, is silencing feminist voices. So it's prenatal screening, it's maternal care. There is a huge problem that starts with the representation of the voices of women and ends up with the abortion constriction. So thank you for that. And now let's move to Croatia, another hot country for reproductive freedom and reproductive justice, as well as actually human rights in the large sense. So please, Marina. Marina is coming from Solidarna Foundation, a human rights foundation. But she's also representing here a platform on reproductive rights in Croatia. And she has experience of incredible grassroots mobilization that will be a pleasure to listen to.
Thank you very much. Thank you all who are here today. It is already clear that solidarity across Europe is well and alive, and that the more we know and share about the tactics, the strategies, and the big agenda of the Christian fundamentalists across our continent, the more we know about each other's needs, it will be easier for us to resist, but also to move from the defense to the counter-offensive mode of operation, where I truly believe, just like many of all of us across the continent, that the time is not right only for resistance and for resilience, but also for enhancement of sexual and reproductive rights and gender equality across our continent. We should not be trying only to protect, but also to enact more ambitious, more inclusive, and more down-to-earth, user-friendly, humane set of policies that are going to make Europe what it has always been. And this is the continent where people live with dignity, respect, and in freedom. Yeah, it's all clear, yeah. So I would like to share with you, I'm very happy that my colleague Paula Zore from a Platform for Reproductive Rights, who is one of the coordinators, is here with us, so I'm sure that she is also going to contribute to the discussion. But I'll just quickly share with you some of the experiences and lessons learned from the most recent European member state, and that is Croatia. And what is interesting that the last 5 years, exactly since Croatia acceded to the EU, and that was July 2013, since then, Christian fundamentalists are really taking the floor in political, media, and social realm. And this is not an accident. It is not an accident. We knew, many of us who were advocating for years the introduction of human rights framework during the accession period, we expected that this would happen because this kind of good bad cop role of the EU just diminishes once you enter the EU. These last 5 years in the EU have been very complicated. EU has been struggling to just keep itself together, and it's obvious that there is an open ground on top of the economic crisis for different types of occupations of people's minds and primarily women's bodies. So just to give you just an overview, in Croatia we have very well organized, full-blown, very internationally connected Christian fundamentalist movement at this point, which was successful already in 2013 to change our constitution and to introduce a heteronormative definition of marriage, which was actually a preemptive attack against expected gender equality legislation. But one lesson learned is that even though they changed the constitution, that same year Croatian LGBT families did get higher level of protection through the law on same-sex partnerships. But at the symbolic and discursive level, they did manage to play with the constitution as if it was a toy for ideological battles, and as if it is possible, and unfortunately it is possible, that the majority can decide upon the future and dignity of families of minorities. So this whole movement, just like in Catalonia, just like in Spain, everywhere, just like everywhere else, is actually very perversely using the legacy of emancipatory civil rights movements around the world and around Europe. They have learned everything, and they have upgraded them, and have perversely are actually introducing a new concept of human rights. And the new concept of human rights is that the majority, the rights of the majority in any society, especially traditional majorities, should be protected from external elements, be it immigrants, be it new lifestyles, be it national minorities, sexual minorities, gender minorities. So it is the majority that needs to be protected from the minority. And unfortunately, in Croatia, stricken by war, by ideological cleavages, by interethnic trauma, war trauma, with economic problems where 1 million people are actually at risk of poverty. It is like a huge number. It's almost like 1/5 population. It is very easy to manipulate with people's sense of endangered national, religious, identity and their sense that they should be protected, that somebody takes care of them. And they have really managed, through infiltration and strong support from Catholic Church, the institutional support, through infiltration into center-right parties, infiltration into professional associations like doctors' associations. At this very moment, a huge congress of Catholic physicians is being held in Croatia from all across Europe. What they have managed to do is that they have managed to establish themselves as a very important political and social subject. And we cannot ignore them anymore. And they have been using a wide set of tools in Croatia. At present, we have already, over the last 5 years, experienced 4 popular referenda led by the same Christian fundamentalist anti-gender groups. They changed the constitution. At the moment, they are completing their petition to annul the ratification of Istanbul Convention, to change our electoral system, allegedly to support greater participation of the citizens, but actually to be able to organize a referendum on the new law on abortion, which is mandated by the Constitutional Court. It needs to be created over the next year, and we already expect that they are going to try to stop it, any kind of law that is kind of not as good as the former Macedonian law or is in line with the Polish model at the moment. So they're using strategic litigation, they're suing journalists, they're organizing petitions, they're organizing like 4 popular referenda. We have marches for life. We have huge hysteria around any attempt to introduce civic and healthy education in public system. We have huge hysteria, just had one about one children's book talking about rainbow families. So it is like very well-known tactics. But on top of that, they are very, very aggressively and openly advocating for the defunding of human rights defenders and for their ability to access public funding. At the same time, over these years, what we can be proud of in Croatia, that we have been resisting as much as we could, and that we have been using a lot of our social capital, the legacy of horizontal mobilizing and mutual solidarity between environmental groups, LGBT groups, feminist women's human rights groups, national minority rights groups, and we have even managed to create alliances with progressive faith-based theologists and faith-based activists that are fighting against poverty. So we believe that this kind of any solidarity, our whole tradition of solidarity, really plays out in an extremely important manner once you are under attack. The other thing which has been crucial are very strong collaborative relations and open and trust building between investigative journalists, policy analysts, activists and politicians. It is extremely, and it has been instrumental, that mainstream media in Croatia, to a great degree, have trusted more investigative journalists and independent media sources than they have trusted the hysterical media sources that have been producing enormous amount of disinformation and fake news, especially in the last 6 months when we had to survive and win, in the end, the big battle on ratification of Istanbul Convention. This has been very important, and one huge lesson learned for the whole of Europe is that investment into high-quality professional media that are publicly funded is one of the best preventions against Christian fundamentalism. Here you can see one of our colleagues from Carolina from Poland, who has been very much, I forgot, sorry, I have a PowerPoint presentation, but I forgot how to switch it on. But I guess it's okay. Okay, I'll try to be quick. So what has been very important, one big battle won for us, even though it is not a big battle for them. It is not the crucial battle for the fundamentalists, but the Istanbul ratification campaign, which lasted for 6 months in Croatia, was really maliciously trying to create a sense of fear across country for the future of the children that are allegedly being corrupted by gender ideology. These are original slides from PowerPoint presentation that has been showed around churches around the country. They have been like really rallying the whole country for like 6 months. And this has really catered to very irrational fears of people who have actually never in their lives met a trans person or have not even met LGBT people. All of this Istanbul ratification is for the fundamentalists in the local context, in Croatian context, a bypass to their political positioning in respect to abortion law and equally importantly to education reform. Because Croatia is one of the countries in the EU that does not have a systematic civic education introduced into schools, and at the same time, religious education, confessional, is part of the school program, and they very correctly recognize that public education on human rights, reproductive rights, is one of the key key components of having self-confident citizens who are capable of protecting their rights. What for us, these are the pictures. No, it doesn't work. I'm sorry. So in the end, what I wanted to say is that some things that we have learned, the strong spots of this movement is that they are enormously well financed, that they have they are using know-how collected in other countries, just like what we are doing, but they are very good at that. They have infrastructural support from the Catholic Church. They have been very successful in occupying institutions and center-right parties that are under attack, EPP in particular, those parties. And they have been very, very successful in reframing their very extremist agenda in terms of what caters to the ears of local population. In Croatia, it is a matter of sovereignty. Croatian Catholic spirit that is under attack from gays, Serbs, trans people, feminists, independent journalists, or whoever who wants to spoil the party with the reality of human rights marginalization. The weak spots that we have identified and that we really should build on is that, first of all, they very often lack humor. Okay, their campaigns are not funny, they're just trying to make you really afraid, but they are, in the end, when they do 5 of them, one after another, they actually even get boring. The other one is that their funding is completely lacking transparency, and this is one issue which is very important to be raised also in the European Parliament, because the whole campaign against ratification of Istanbul Convention in Croatia, which has directly scapegoated trans people, around which there will be a strategic litigation on part of human rights defenders in Croatia, has been funded and supported by European Christian People's Movement, ECPM. They have their logo on all of their materials, and there is a very open question whether the money from the European Parliament has been directly used in Croatia to stop the ratification of convention that should protect lives of women, and that has been directly used to disinform and to spread hatred and fear of people who are, in any case, non-standard from ideal idea of a traditional family. What is also very important for us to know that this is an elitist movement. It is led by very rich people, that they do not show any social sensitivity. They really don't care whether a woman has to fly somewhere, like whether a woman has means or not. And this is a weak spot, and we should really all work much more on disclosing this very elitist and even market extremist aspect of the Christian fundamentalist movement. Finally, and most importantly, it is high time that at the European level, we really do create very, very dynamic and very courageous coalition where gender equality and gender diversity are reaffirmed as integral components of European value base. Nazism, Stalinism, and fascism, there were 3 big regimes that actually completely exploited, humiliated, and objectified women's bodies. This is what is happening today. And what is the second thing, we should not label, we should not capitulate and overtake the fundamentalists' monopoly over what religion means to European people. Faith-based people can be equally are just like, can be as open to human rights protection just like people who are not faith-based. It is very important to build coalitions with socially progressive, faith-based individuals, activists, and churches, and we should show and say, no pasaran, this continent is not going to become a clero-fascist sunset from Handmaid's Tale. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marina Scravolo, for the very passionate speech. Extremely interesting what's going on in Croatia. But now, again, reflecting on the resistance to this authoritarian pushes and manipulation and smearing and really difficult strategies that let us think about even Brexit. We would like to hear finally from Ireland, a country that has inspired a lot of people and has given a lesson to Europe about reproductive freedom from coercion. So I'm glad they saw the cost. And let's listen now to Katrina Graham. She worked on the Repeal DA's campaign, and she's coming from the Women's Council from Ireland.
Thank you so much. It's a real honour to be here today to share this platform with my sisters and colleagues from across Europe and to hopefully be able to share some of the positive energy that we've had from Ireland with the results from the referendum last week. I think it's really important to recognise that this referendum campaign, while the last few weeks and months were really focused on getting this vote through, it's a campaign that's been built on decades of grassroots movement work. We had a starting point in 1983 when the Constitution was changed and amended to bring in the 8th Amendment, which equated the life of the unborn with the life of the pregnant woman. The fact that this was put into our constitution caused huge challenges for many years. Since that time, we know that over 170,000 women have had to travel abroad to receive abortion services that they should have been able to get in their own countries. Some of these cases were extremely high profile because they really highlighted the extreme vulnerability and impact that such a constitutional amendment could have. We saw grassroots activism growing ever since. I could go through every year by year the different cases that we saw, the experiences that women had, but I will try to focus really on the most recent months of the campaign. But to note a few specific incidents that really, I think, show the impact that this constitutional amendment had within Ireland. The 2010 European Court on Human Rights ruling was really important to show how unacceptable this legal change was. But what really changed things in terms of the Irish public's engagement with this issue was in 2012 when Savita Halappanavar, a doctor who had moved to Ireland from India, she was pregnant with a very much wanted pregnancy. She found out that she was miscarrying and was told that she could not receive an abortion even though she was currently miscarrying. She had not realised that this was not possible in Ireland. She repeatedly asked for an abortion. She was repeatedly told that there was still a heartbeat. So as long as there was a fetal heartbeat, she could not receive an abortion. And in the end, she got sepsis and she died due to sepsis, which could have been prevented had she been able to receive reproductive services that she very much wanted, requested, and should have been able to get earlier. So this completely unnecessary death really awoke for the Irish people the reality that was being experienced as a result of this. It showed the cruelty and the inhumanity of this amendment, and it really made people come to the streets. We then finally had in 2013 the law that had been called for, both in terms of Irish courts at the European level and through grassroots movements, which was the Protection of Life During Pregnancy Act. This law change was supposed to legalise abortion in the case of the life of the woman being threatened, either from illness or if she was having mental health problems and was suicidal. This law was opposed by religious institutions, conservative institutions. They said this went too far, it was unethical, and it went against the spirit of the 8th Amendment. I think it's important to remember that they had such strong opposition to this law at that time when we see what happened as we came into the final months of the referendum campaign. Of course, this law did not solve everything. In 2014, we had a case of Miss Y, who was an asylum-seeking woman. And I think this case really showed that while if you were from a privileged background, if you were an Irish person who had the money to travel, you could access safe abortion. It was safe. It wasn't as safe as it could be, but it was safer. But if you could not travel because you were a migrant woman, because you were in poverty, because you were a child who was not able to access travel documentation, then you would have to either have an illegal abortion or you'd be forced to stay pregnant. That caused huge problems. For Miss Y, she requested an abortion. She was told this wasn't possible. She requested to travel for an abortion. She was not given travel permission. In the end, she was suicidal and she went on hunger strike. The courts had to give permission to force hydrate her. And in the end, she was given a forced C-section. So they said that this was an acceptable interpretation of the law, and that under the Protection of Life During Pregnancy Act, it would be absolutely acceptable to wait until the pregnancy was viable and then terminate the pregnancy in this way. So the campaigns grew. We saw again and again that this was unacceptable, but the opposition also grew. We took to the streets and we tried to really highlight the everyday lived experiences for women. Unfortunately, the opposition, the anti-choice groups, they were better resourced than we were. I think internationally, Ireland was seen as one of the last bastions for the pro-life position. And so they really, we had campaigners coming from America, from across the world, trying to resource the anti-choice campaign. This was a huge issue for our democracy. In the recent years of the campaign, we saw that they were using similar tactics to what the Trump administration used during the campaign, what the Brexit referendum used, pro-Brexit referendum campaigning. So we saw the same kind of tactics. We saw them take simple messages that were possibly not even very accurate or very true. These were put onto posters, they were put onto websites, they were put into places where you didn't have to be able to stand over those positions, where you didn't have to be able to back it up with credible evidence-based materials. So they really tried to simplify the message, to send fear messages to people, and to play on historical positions that Ireland was a Catholic country, that we could love both, and that this was really not about women's rights, but it was about humanity. So we had to counter that by constantly showing the lived experiences of women, the reality of abortion in Ireland, that Irish abortions happened every single day, that 9 women travelled for abortion every day, and that an estimated 3 women were seeking illegal abortion pills and having abortions in their homes without medical supervision every day. So to respond to those mistruths, we tried to use the evidence to show the lived experiences of women, to show women's stories, to put women front and centre in the campaign. We saw that the opposition, the anti-choice campaigners, they really tried to play on conservative ideology and conservative values. They had ads in papers that said that it's a man's duty to protect life. They had pictures of firemen and of army soldiers saying that, you know, men have to protect, as if women were these horrible creatures who were trying to kill and murder. So we really needed to show that that was not the case, that men could stand with women, that we recognised in a situation of very difficult decision-making, that we needed to step back and trust that woman to show her care, support and compassion. The campaign for the repeal of the 8th Amendment, it was a feminist campaign. It was ran with 3 organisations coming together who had worked on different levels from different aspects of society. It was the National Women's Council of Ireland, the Coalition to Repeal the 8th Amendment and the Abortion Rights Campaign. They came together as co-directors. All decision-making was made in a joint way. We linked with groups from all across Ireland. So we really tried to break down this idea that it was only certain groups who were really progressive, that actually to be pro-choice was to be within the middle ground, to be within the mainstream. We had farmers for choice, we had men for choice, scientists for choice. We had over 1,500 doctors for choice, we had lawyers for choice. So we really tried to show that this is a matter of health, this is a matter of saving lives, it's a matter of respecting what the reality is in Ireland. We saw on the opposition a very different attitude. We saw that there was a senator who was anti-choice who questioned whether mental health was an appropriate ground for an abortion, whether mental health was legitimate. We saw an anti-abortion campaigner saying that, okay, maybe in 1 year, 3,400 Irish women travelled for abortion services, but when you look at the numbers, actually only 2,400 of those were white Irish women, and so that immediately reduces the numbers. So they tried to play on some of the populist narratives we're seeing as if we didn't care about migrant women. But I think that we can see the impact that that had when you can see how much people valued the life of Savita, when people were able to rally around what happened to her, that these were not the kind of values that the Irish people wanted to stand beside. The Irish people wanted to stand beside the values of respect, compassion, care, understanding, all of these really important tenets that can bring people together. I think it really showed for the traditional Catholic Ireland that it was very much possible to come from a Catholic faith background and to still stand for reproductive rights, to be able to respect what people's experiences were. And I think in the end, that was what really won the day and brought us the wonderful 66.4 result that we had last week.
Thank you, Katrina. I get even emotional listening to you, and I think for us it's so important that you're coming with this message, because I think Europeans are aligned. Europeans care about women. They do share empathy with the reality of their lives. You know, we cannot refuse to see reality. We want to care for each other, and we want to protect women from harm and from violence. And that was such a powerful, powerful message that all the Irish people, women and men, young and older, it was amazing to see. And as you pointed out, it's beautiful because this doesn't belong to a specific side of the political spectrum. It doesn't belong to a specific faith or beliefs. You can be Catholic, you can be anything you want in the world, but you can still care about people's reproductive and sexual lives free from violence, and we are so happy for that. So now that we had this very powerful and incredibly interesting panel, it's my pleasure to open the floor to the audience. And in particular, I think that we heard many requests, if you want, from the panelists in relation to the role of the European Union and the role of the European Parliament, what Europe can do for the cause and to protect women at national level. So maybe if there are members of the Parliament who wants to take the floor and say something about that?
Thank you very much. Hi, my name is Terry Reinke, and I'm from the Green Group and also part of the All of Us coalition. Thank you so much for all these insights. I mean, I've been working on this topic already for a while, but every time I hear this kind of discussions, I'm on the one side outraged by all the things that are going on, and at the same time super empowered and super optimistic that we can really win this battle, because there are so strong activists and forces in all parts of Europe who are resisting this kind of backlash. I wanted to make one comment and then maybe ask one question or highlight one thing. And I think that for me it was very interesting to see at the one hand the similarities between the situations in the different countries, but on the other hand also the differences, and especially looking a little bit at East and West in Europe. Because listening to Sari and Christina and Marina, I think it's very interesting what happened after the fall of the Eastern Bloc in Central and Eastern Europe. Because basically when I hear you speak, you can see that there was years and maybe decades of, well, pouring of really backward reactionary ideology and also funding into countries from Central and Eastern Europe who were trying to build a new regime of gender, of fundamental rights, and so on and so on, very often in allyship with the churches on the ground. And I think that has created a very specific kind of atmosphere that also makes it sometimes even more difficult for us now to see what we can do in order to support you on the ground to kind of fight back. Because, and I think that this is also something that progressive forces have to take note of, I think we have lost a lot of time not really doing anything and trying to build these networks, especially with countries in Central and Eastern Europe. And that leads me to the second point, because Sari, you mentioned this, but also others, the question of how can we have instruments of giving funding to grassroots initiatives. I think it's not only an issue for Central and Eastern Europe. I think this is actually an issue all over the European Union, that we have restricted access of civil society to funding system. And you might have heard that the European Parliament has just adopted the introduction of a so-called European values instrument, which would exactly do what you have suggested. And I think it's very important now the question, how will this look like in practice? Because exactly like you say, if it's again money that the European Commission gives to the government of the member states, it's not going to go into the civil society and the grassroots initiatives that we want it to go to. So we will work from the All of Us side, and also with other allies here in the European Parliament, that it will be a re-granting system, that this is really money that directly goes to civil society actors who are fighting against this backlash, because I think otherwise it can actually be detrimental to the struggle, and it can actually make it more difficult to support you on the ground. So really, we have to follow up on this. And maybe as a question also to you, what would be specific points for us to maybe put specific focus on? What are maybe recommendations that you have? If you have any needs, really let us know, and we will try to really shape this in a way that it is helpful for you, because this is, in the end, what this money is meant for. Thanks.
Yes, thank you. Ernest Urtasun, also from the Greens. Well, first of all, congratulations to all of you, and thanks for your work. And well, one of the first things I want to say, and I agree very much with what has been said about the need to have a strategy of enhancing rights and not be on the defensive side. I think this is very, very important. And I take the case of Spain that Almudena was saying. I have the impression that in Spain, society took for granted that we had a certain law, and then came the new government and wanted to change that completely. And it took a bit Spanish society on the defensive side. And why did we achieve to block the reform that they wanted? I think it's precisely because we had organizations like the one that Almudena is here that were extremely active and prepared to fight that. But now that we block that, it's very important that we continue enhancing rights. And for instance, now, we will have a progressive government in Spain. We have to be demanding with them, very demanding, that we want to go further in the defense of the rights and in stopping the so-called new anti-choice movements that are very present in Spain, and Almudena was saying. So this attitude of enhancing rights, I think it's very important. And secondly, I think the support of movements like yours are really, really important. And that leads me to the European level. There is one thing that I think we need to be worried about, which is the majorities in the parliament. I mean, in the chamber during this term, we have had a majority in favor of sexual and reproductive rights in several occasions. In different votes, in different reports, that was very clear, and that was very good. Also because in the previous term, we came from what happened with the Estrela report that everybody remembers. Now, this has changed during that term. What will happen in the next parliament, the next majority? That's a risk. And I think that we really need to work together also to make that an issue during the campaign, so we are able to influence the next majority. Because I think if we manage to have the same majority the next time, and it will be difficult, but we can achieve that, then I think we can start being very, very demanding at EU level in trying to frame the defense of sexual and reproductive rights better at EU level, because at the moment what we have is extremely weak. No, but just to make the point that I wanted to make is the risk of a changing majority in the parliament the next term. We need to be aware of that, and we need to work together in order to avoid this. It's very, very important.
Hello, everybody. My name is Biljana Borzan, and I'm also in PEM committee. And first of all, I would like to thank you all for sharing this thoughts and information from all the countries in the EU. And also, I would like, first of all, to congratulate to Ireland, because Ireland is really, really nice example for all of us. And I think that the estimations before the referendum were that it will be a tight result. But in the end, we saw that the result was really, really something that we should look up to. Marina was talking about situation in Croatia. I also come from Croatia, and it's very hard to add anything because her passionate speech was really encompassing almost everything important. I would just like to say that we have a Constitutional Court's decision which says that abortion should not be forbidden. But on the other hand, we have a Minister of Health who says that Catholic Church should be seriously involved in revision of the law, because we have to have a revision of this law within 2 years when the Constitutional Court made a decision, and it was 1 year ago. So we have, in next February it will be 2 years. So when you have a minister who says that church should be involved in writing of this new law, it is for me something that we should be worried about. We also have, for example, a colleague from EPP group here from Croatia who said that she voted against this law against discrimination because this law discriminates some parts of society. Of course, it is called positive discrimination. So, as Marina said, we have majority who tries to impose their way of life and of thinking to everybody. And if you are a minority, then your protection is something that it's not so important for some parts of our society. I mean, in politics. Also, I think that experiences from Poland are always something that we should talk about, and thank Christina again for sharing what's going on in Poland, because I think it's very important for us to talk about your experiences, but unfortunately, I'm not sure that people are ready to learn on your negative experiences. Sometimes people, just look from the side and they don't want to be involved. And then when situations start to be serious, then everybody says, oh, I don't know what happened. So if we have so strong and very well organized these NGOs that are related strongly to conservative Catholic Church, then sometimes it's very important for all of us who think in a different way to protect women, for example. In this case, we should be very, very active and loud. The problem is funding, of course. For example, from my experience, I can say that when we have, for example, some kind of Estrella report or any other report like this, my mailbox is full of messages from conservative NGOs. And those who are not conservative, I mean those from the other side who want to protect women, are not so loud. I think I'm convinced that the reason for that is funding. It's impossible to have a successful combat if you don't have such a large amount of money as those conservative NGOs have. So, also, there is one little thing that I would like to add on this Spanish perspective. We in Croatia have a law which is not so restrictive right now. I mean, abortion it's possible to perform, but unfortunately, in our hospitals, there are some hospitals without any doctor who want to perform. He knows how to perform abortion, but they have all conscientious
It's a hard word, actually.
Yeah. So, and it means that you can fight for some kind of law, and you can have it, but if there is no will to perform all the things that law says, then you have nothing. So it's really important for. I'm a medical doctor, so I always like to say to my young colleagues, if you want to be gynecologist, please think about all the aspects of your work. If you are not ready to perform every single detail that is that some patient would need from you, then don't do that. Yeah. If you have a problem. If you have a problem with, I don't know, bad smells, don't be a pathologist. If you have a problem with abortion, don't be a gynecologist. So I don't want to bother you anymore, because I think there are lots of people who would like to speak here today. Once again, I would like to thank all of you, and I really I'm looking forward for the events like this in future, and I hope that we will have as many positive experiences from European Union as possible. Thank you.
Sorry. Now we would be delighted to hear also some reactions, comments, or also testimonies from the audience in relation to what's happening in your countries on drinking space for human rights defenders or on abortion and reproductive rights, and also about maybe successful strategies to respond or what the European Union should be doing. Please.
Hello, I come from Poland and I'm really thrilled to be here, and I'd like to thank Marina. Sorry, I haven't catch your last name. Thanks. It was an exquisite presentation. I would like to share with you some of my views on what are on the similarities and differences, because as it was said, for instance, I noticed recently, because of course I was following the Irish referendum, like, yeah. You have doctors for choice and you have lawyers for choice. We only recently have a small grassroots movement of doctors after our government decided to forbid the over-counter sales of the morning after pill. And I don't know any single organization of lawyers in Poland that would say openly that they are pro-choice or pro-women. Just the opposite. Our anti-abortion law was lobbied to great extent by doctors. What is really stunning and really shocking for me is that our ombudsman in Poland a couple of times said that abortion is not human law. And he is perceived as a very progressive person. So this is absolutely shocking for me, because he's standing up for many groups that are oppressed. I have never once seen him speak anything of favor, and this would be almost enough, but saying exactly on the day when there was an attempt of liberalizing abortion law, at the same day of trying to make it even more stricter, he said it's not a human law. And I find it like really, really, really shocking. So I think we have a severe problem. Moreover, I need to mention this, but, even if it is a little bit mean. Previous, because Marina, you were saying about there were attempts were mentioned that your minister wants a church to be consulted in preparing new law. We had it already, not in the government that we have now. We had it in the previous government when they were under the pretext of improving some other laws, not even the abortion laws, but general codex of punishment. Sorry if I'm using, sorry to the lawyers if I'm using the wrong terms. And the government, which was the ruling party, is actually a member of ALDE. And they allowed the commission preparing the law to consult a very strict and fanatic Catholic organization. Of course they denied it, and they didn't implement the changes. It was really a secret attempt to penalize not even abortions, but also natural miscarriages, like in some Catholic countries in Salvador. And I want to mention, because not everybody knows, that we in Poland also had our Savita 9 years earlier, when a woman was denied diagnosis even. It's all written on Federa's page. The name was Agata Lamczak. So it looks that we have a real problem, and I tend to despair a little bit. It doesn't mean stop fighting or stop resisting, but we really don't see much that Europe as such can do to protect our rights. I mean, okay, so the European...
I'm very sorry, madam, but for a question of time, if you could come to your conclusions, because I have to ask people to be brief so that there will be more people who will be able to take the floor, if you don't mind. Huh?
Yeah, what I'm dreaming of is that Europe and the European institutions as such give us some sort of support, because even allowing the morning after pill over the counter wasn't effective in Poland and nothing happened. And I'm wondering, is there any way by the institutions to help women, to help women, that's it, because it really looks bad, really. Thank you.
Okay, so a request for the floor. Can I ask you to say your name, the organization you're coming from, and then if you can make briefly your point, Karin.
Thank you. Sorry, I didn't say mine. Małgorzata Danicka. I'm currently working in the Commission, but that I'm not here from my institution. I'm just of my personal interest because I'm a woman. Thank you.
And bravo for that. I'm Karen Hain. I'm an independent consultant. I have a number of clients, but I'm also on the board of an organization that just established, I'm on the European board, newly established, of Faith to Action Network, which is an interfaith collaboration that is committed to promoting dialogue on family planning, reproductive health, and girls' and women's rights. Because, as you mentioned, the majority of religious people do not oppose women's rights, and many religious leaders that are extremists do not reflect either the views of their religious text nor the views of their communities. So anyone who would like to connect with that group, Irena knows how to reach me. If you don't reach me today, I'm happy to make available speakers or access to resources that communications and resources that can be helpful for countering those extremist, often false religious positions.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Marta Monforte. I am a Spanish journalist, and I think it was a really interesting panel. And I want to ask you all about a topic which is not that related with abortion, but just with the title of the panel, No Control Over My Body. We had a really interesting debate last year in Spain about surrogate maternity, to pay a woman for having children, and I want to know your opinion about that. Thank you.
Okay. Does anyone from the panel like to respond to this? See, that's your question? Yeah.
So I might just briefly respond. I think it's a challenging new issue that is maybe in some ways similar to when we're talking about reproductive rights, in that you can have a lot of health institutions and larger institutions that are very well resourced, holding very particular perspective on this, that can gain a lot of credibility and possibly a lot of finances through these systems. There are obviously a variety of perspectives on surrogacy, but I think that we need to be very careful when we're talking about women's rights and women's role in surrogacy, and in particular the pregnant woman or the birth mother, and to make sure that we create any laws in relation to assisted reproduction, really examine her vulnerability in that situation, and that no amount of legislation or contracts in an individual case can absolutely ensure that there will be no harm, no exploitation, and no coercion in those instances. I think when money comes into it, you're looking at systems that are really come down to power, come down to vulnerability, insecurity, poverty, and can really tie in with a lot of other issues when we're looking at the more vulnerable women in our society. So I think that that's something we need to be very careful to probe really, really in detail at any legislative models.
Hello, my name is Alexia Fafara. I am an intern in the European Parliament, and I have a small question for our Polish guest, Pani Krystyna. Well, my question is a bit naive, but still, I was wondering if we can hope for a Polish referendum on the question of abortion. I know that in the 90s, Barbara Labuda tried to have a referendum, and it was impossible because of the alliance of the state and the church and the so-called politics of morality. But then today we see that the citizens' initiative, like by Barbara Nowacka and Ratujmy Kobiety, are not working. But maybe shouldn't we use the current momentum that we have at the international and European level to try to pressure Poland on this? Thank you very much.
Referendum. To answer for the question on human rights, this is not the solution for us. We will never organize, I think, and I hope, referendum on this. The referendum in Ireland, it was the other case, it was the constitution. But right now, in Poland, we are in a process of preparing a third draft law on liberalization, because we want to have a new, modern European law. And this is not the truth that we are only defensive in our efforts. We were much more offensive, but there is no any support for us. There is no political support. There is no founders' support. There is no EU support direct for us. So we stayed alone. Of course, we felt solidarity and still feel solidarity of many, many women in the world, many women's organizations, many individual members of parliament, members of All of Us initiative. But really, we need better climate for our issue. Of course, we will not stop fighting. Polish women will never be the same. And hope we will, in the near future, we'll have a better supportive political climate. And the first law we will deliver to the new parliament for sure will be on liberalization, the abortion law in Poland. So no referendum, not at all. You talked about the referendum in the 90s. It was the referendum. We collected over 1.5 million signatures under this referendum. This referendum had one question: do you want to secure the existing law, very progressive law, so there was a backlash in Poland, or do you want to change this law? And all these signatures were neglected and thrown out. The new law was decided without the participation of the society, above all, without the participation of women. It is called a compromise, but it was the compromise between Catholic Church and politicians. And over past 26 years, all political parties did everything to secure this compromise. So we had referendum, and we won in this referendum, but nobody cared about this. Thank you.
Thank you, because that's, again, really underlining how democratic, actually, processes can be totally harmed and hijacked by fundamentalist views over women autonomy and people's freedom, particularly reproductive and sexual freedoms. I know Katrina wants to make a comment, and then I'll give the floor to Terry, who also asked for it.
Thanks very much. I think to answer again, I would absolutely back up that I think, as you said, Marina, that if it does not have to go into the Constitution, it should not. It's not the place to have these kind of debates. We need to have these conversations somewhere where there's flexibility, so that as new issues and opportunities emerge, that we can be responsive and we can change laws and change healthcare practices. So these are issues that should always stay out of the Constitution. I think the better climate is a really important point. And we are talking a lot, I think, in lots of different member states around the political climate, not only when it comes to reproductive rights, but all women's rights, because we know that all of these issues are around a woman being able to choose the kind of life that she wants to live. And I think this is something that we really need to stay strong on, and something that will really help this is if more women and more feminists and more feminist women are running for government. I think if we had more feminist perspectives institutions, in these institutions, then we will really see a different kind of fight happening, a different kind of battle happening. So I think that we need to really be encouraging people within our communities, if we see potential for them to be running and to be in those kind of positions, that this is really important. And Terry, you had asked about where money should go. I think it's really important that, as we say, it should go to the civil society organizations working in these spaces. On frontline services, we need more and better and stronger research. But it needs to go farther than research. It needs to be long-term programs that let us take that research, turn it into campaigns, turn it into longer-term programs, so that we're not only looking at something, but we can actually do something with that. So we need this real in-depth for core funding, long-term funding. We need to make sure that abortion is free, safe, legal, and rare. We know that part of what really helped in Ireland was to share that if you have really liberal abortion legislation models, that the rate of abortion, the regularity of abortion is reduced, and this is through a comprehensive package that includes not only access to reproductive health care, but also access to contraceptives, and that has really strong comprehensive sexuality education. And I think this is again at the core of so many of these issues. It will help to prevent sexual harassment, help to prevent rape, and help to prevent the need for abortion.
Thank you. I think Terry wanted to have the floor.
I just wanted to comment on one statement that was made about this frustration that Europe is not doing enough in order to really push for access, safe and legal access to abortion in all member states in the European Union. And I think it's a frustration that many of us here in the European Parliament actually share, because if we had the possibility, we would really like to legislate on it. I just want to make you aware of one thing which I think you have to keep in mind when we discuss this. I think if we now start this debate about the European Union, fighting for having a fundamental right to access to abortion all over the European Union, what will come back is not going to be a discussion about this right. What will come back, and this is just a reality that I'm trying to make you aware of, is a discussion about subsidiarity. It's going to be a discussion about which level should actually legislate on what. And I think this has been actually really successfully done in the discussion on the Istanbul Convention. Because in the end, we are not having a political discussion about whether we should protect women from violence, but we are having a discussion about whether the Europeans can tell us this or that. And I just want in our strategies for all of us to be aware that what for us is actually better is to have the political discussion, because I think that we can win the political discussion. And I know that in many countries it's a very, very hard climate and it's a very, very hard atmosphere, and I think we need to do everything from the European level to support you on the ground. But I just want us all to be aware that when we kind of derail this to a question of which convention is giving which right to the European level to legislate on what, this is almost probably not going to be helpful, but really distract from the issue that we are trying to talk about. So I'm not trying to push the responsibility away from us. I think we need to do much more on the European level to support you, but I think this needs to be a multi-level battle, that we work together, network together, and fight together with the abilities that we have on the different levels.
Thank you, Terry. I have another request for the floor from Molly.
Yeah, I just want to echo you, Terry, on that, because the EU doesn't have the competence to legislate on abortion rights, and my personal position is that it's well like that, because I think the struggle, we have to win it at national levels, and we want a discussion on the contents, on the subject matter. We really need, and where we can win it, and you can win it nationally, and you can win it talking to the people that are around you. So, and I heard, the canvassing that went on the last few weeks, that was just very, very impressive, but it was people talking to people at home.
Hi, so I'm Colette McAllister and I'm in with Martina Anderson's office at the minute. But it was brilliant to hear from all of you as comrades and sisters, I suppose, just from all the perspectives, and really touching on kind of the fact that it's a socio-economic aspect to it. It's the stigmatisation and criminalisation of women, and more than anything, it's just kind of not trusting women to know what is in their best interest, and that in itself is obviously touching on welfare and a lot else. But from being a 22-year-old Irish woman from County Antrim, it means that obviously we're facing into Brexit, but we also don't have reproductive rights reaching the rest of us in Ireland. And we were behind our Sisters in Repeal campaign, and we're absolutely delighted to see that come into play. But it was just very interesting, Katrina, whenever you were touching on the fact that that campaign and aspect during repeal from the anti-choice side was very similar to that we saw in Brexit and in Trump, in terms of those really simple messages with no facts behind them, not evidence-based, but not being asked to defend where that was coming from. And I suppose I wanted to kind of just come in and say thank you, and to say that we are hopeful that we continue to fight for the rest of the women in the 6 counties, because across Ireland we all deserve our right to decide for ourselves what's in our best interest. So thank you.
I also want to make a comment, because I think it's important to realize that there are serious threats and oppressive measures that have been taken particularly in Central and Eastern Europe. They are very scary. But as Almudena reminded us, there are really nasty stuff happening in Spain. And we all saw what happened when they were trying to introduce almost a total ban of abortion, and really a lot of reproductive coercion in Spain just a couple of years ago. So let's remember, there's not just the East, there's something that's creeping around everywhere. And now I speak as an Italian, because we are facing a crisis in Italy right now. We talked about objection of conscience, which is a massive problem. We had the woman who died, Valentina Miluzzo, in 2016, and that didn't lead to the same type of solidarity and rallies that you saw in Ireland. It just was all forgotten after a couple of days, and we are trying to remind people what the cost is when people put their ideology, material interests, and other particular beliefs before the interest of their patients and before the health of women. So let's remember that there are lots of very important dynamics. We have a new government, and we have a party in particular in this new government that has appointed a new minister for the family, Mr. Fontana, who was a former member of this House, former European Parliament member, who is clearly an extremist anti-choice person. We know his party is connected to Russia, and we know that in Russia there are a lot of very extremist views and political support for a certain agenda. His party is very supportive of Trump administration. So there is a political agenda that exists globally. It's not just happening here and there in different countries, in different contexts. This is a much bigger piece. It's linked to very authoritarian and anti-democratic policies and agendas. So we have to be very careful. They're using the same strategies to crash on women's rights and people's rights. And they also have a very particular agenda around the European Union. Let's be very conscious about that and denounce it. And now my pleasure is to pass the floor to Malin, because we are reaching the end, and we have still sorry, Marina, did you need? Yeah. Okay, so that we want to give you also something concrete to finish this important discussion. Please, Malin.
I would like to first give the floor to the panelists for 1-2 minutes to say their things on their hearts and minds. So maybe we can start by that. Here, yeah.
Thank you very much. Once again, thank you for hosting us. Thank you to the European Parliament and all the MEPs that have hosted this event. Our hopes are high, I would say, in Croatia. We are going to be fighting a big battle for a modern, progressive law that is going to be very good source of protection of sexual and reproductive rights understood in their entirety. But there are several forms of support that would be useful. First of all, from the European Parliament, it would be very useful to actually maybe explore an opportunity to write a report, to compile a report on the role of Christian fundamentalism in undermining the European human rights and democratic framework. If we already do have fundamentalism as such established as a political, concept, why should it be why should Christian fundamentalism be kept out of it? To be very honest, I'm usually in Croatia. What is interesting, people who are pro-choice and pro-gender are also pro-immigration. And we are very much trying to bring down Islamophobia in our countries. But at the same time, fundamentalism is a certain political doctrine and a certain social and political project which should be deconstructed and disclosed. So this is one form of support that would be very useful. Another form of support would be introducing higher levels of stronger and more strict criteria on access to policy making and access to public funding in terms of value base of groups that are accessing policy making processes at the EU level but also locally. And the third thing that I strongly believe is that strengthening our common public space, our media sphere, is extremely important. It is extremely important because a lot of these fears are being fueled by lies.
Thank you very much, and we will certainly be with you in the fight in Croatia now. Ireland, shortly.
Thanks so much. I think, first of all, absolutely, the North is next. Thank you so much for bringing it up. And I think it's really important to recognise that, again, in the North of Ireland, we don't need a constitutional change. It's a legal change. And I think yesterday's debate in the UK showed that there is very strong support, and we're absolutely going to stand with our sisters. I think when we're talking about the EU's role in reproductive rights, absolutely, we need to be funding at the grassroots, speaking at the grassroots level, speaking to European citizens. But we cannot forget the importance of the role in the EU in that. Some of the tools, the laws, the resolutions that come out are very important and crucial advocacy tools for those grassroots campaigners. So we can't forget that that can be a very strong advocacy tool as well, and we need to still make sure that we're doing this at all levels and not only at grassroots. Mobilisation and collective attitudes and collective campaigning is absolutely crucial. Now, speaking with my European Women's Lobby hat on, we are currently convening a task force within our membership looking at a feminist vision for sexual reproductive health and rights. I think we need to come together and really show solidarity as civil society organisations and grassroots campaigners to make sure that we're sending the same message upwards and outwards. And finally, I think we need to make sure that at the centre of all of this, at every level, is that we are lifting the stories and experiences of women in these situations. Cheers.
Thank you. Looking forward to that feminist vision. I think we all share it, though, but we can make it more clear, maybe. Hungary, please. I go just this way.
I'm sorry. Well, I want to thank you again for inviting me and letting me speak here. I think I'm going to take the opportunity to emphasize again just how much trouble we are in Hungary at the moment, and to answer your previous question, that what we need, the help that would actually do something is core funding, not projects. That is what's missing. We can't pay the rent. That is basically what's happening, and we can't pay staff. And there are Hungary is full of wonderful feminist experts who can't afford to work for organizations like us because we can't pay them, and I also agree with your assessment. I think that feminist activism will be the answer to this, what's going on right now, because I truly believe that the hatred of women is just incompatible with democracy. So that's what I would start with. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Spain.
Thank you again for the opportunity. And I would like to come to the possibility to work together to approve the European directive recognizing women's right to bodily sovereignty, because I need to explain why for us is one of the main objectives. Sovereignty, corporal sovereignty of women challenges heteropatriarchal, neoliberal and neo-colonial democracy and the fundamentalism that maintain it. So it's true that the corporal sovereignty of women can transform the society and can to extend the democracy for everybody in the world. So I truly believe that fundamentalists know it. And that's why feminist entities and feminist collectives working on sexual and reproductive rights are the target of the sexual their attacks. So I think maybe I threw this idea here, and I hope we can the opportunity to work together in order to achieve it. Thank you so much.
As I'm the last one, I would like to say that I hope that in the future European Parliament we will have at least same majority for reproductive rights. Would like to thank you for this opportunity and for many other opportunities in the past from the part of the members of European Parliament, those progressive, of course. And would like to say also that our umbrellas are at the ready, and we will not allow in no case to introduce the more restrictive law, but we'll continue our fight to regain reproductive rights in Poland, and hope for your assistance and help. Hope that this assistance and help will be preceded by friendly political conversations with Polish new parliament and new government. So we hope also to have more friendly climate. But anyway, we will keep our fight as long as needed. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I wanted to give some of my closing time remarks to the panelists, because I know you have so much to say, and I think you're the main thing today. I just want to say from the All of Us coalition with Terry, Angelica, that you have met, Maria Arena, and ourselves, that for us this is one of the most important things we do. We have other supporters here in the room, Maria Nest and Anna Hedos here, Maria Neuschel and others. So you have strong supporters in the European Parliament. We're actors that are prepared to support you in any possible way, and we will stand by you. The thing is that what I just want to say is that we will learn about each other's strategies, and we will be inspired by when we move forward like a giant leap, like in Ireland, but also by the small steps, by challenging conscience clauses where they are being, and having some progress on that side. And I think what has been very, very clear here is that, and I think that goes for all of us in the All of Us coalition. I know this, but also for many others working on sexual and reproductive health and rights and abortion rights, is that it's part of a vision of a society, and what society we want to live in, like Marina said here. Democracy starts with our bodies, whether it be whatever body we live in. It starts with that. Without that, we have no democracy, we have no future. And believe me, we are fighting for that. We have been fighting with our colleagues, more conservative colleagues in this House, to say, well, yeah, it's all fine. We also want to discuss the rule of law, but we have to discuss with our bodies also. We are here, they are here, So that's where we are. I have certainly going away with lots of, inspiration, knowledge, also thinking about the best possible strategies, and we will continue working on that, because we are pro-choice, but we are pro-compassion, we are pro-care, we are pro-gender justice, we are pro-social justice, freedom, democracy. I think we have the agenda for change, and that's where I go away, and that's why I think we will actually win and increase our majority for next elections. Okay, thank you.